bestie.
Good morning, Shira. How are you?
Good. I'm doing good. And today we are going to talk about pushing yourself.
Pushing yourself past your comfort zone?
Pushing yourself, I think, in every single area of your life. And, I'm excited because I'm going to do this exercise on you.
Okay.
Because maybe you know it already. When you were a kid, did they do the, raise your hand exercise with you? No?
No idea what you're talking
goodness.
about.
My siblings, used to use it as, a prank when I would come home and they'd be like, okay, raise your hand as high as you can.
Okay.
Okay, so do it.
Wait, I should raise my hand?
Yeah.
Okay.
So don't worry, this is just on camera. You shouldn't feel awkward at all. Okay, so you're raising it as high as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So now raise it a drop higher. Okay, but it went higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, do you see how you at first, I said the highest.
Can I put my hand up?
Yeah, you can put your hand down. The entire podcast, you have to keep your hand up. And then you don't have to type or do any work for the rest of the day. But that they used to be like, you see you lied. It's like you lied because you thought that it was the highest and then you pushed yourself a little bit harder and you saw how you got it a little bit higher.
Right.
So it's sort of was a lesson, but it was turned into a tease. I love as kids, how we can sort of do that of when something is supposed to be meaningful, but then you use it to poke at each other.
Yeah.
So that was the thing of it, but it really does, I think, have a really interesting connotation where it's you think you're trying your hardest, but even when you're at the pinnacle of pushing yourself, there's always that little element of can I do a little bit more? Can I go even a centimeter higher than I thought I could?
Yeah, and I think that in today's era, we're hearing a lot about pause.
Mm-hmm.
Stop. And I think that for me, that's really a struggle that I face. So I'm happy that we're gonna dive into this, and right now maybe we'll resolve some of my own issues, which is what I use this podcast platform for anyhow. But when to pause? When are you supposed to push yourself? If you're scrolling through Instagram, there's one work out, work harder, do the best, do more, stop, discipline. And then the next one is soft song,
relax,
grass, breathe, pause. Pause is better for you. So I guess pause versus push, when to pause. This is something that I'm constantly coming up in my life of when do I do more or when do I stop?
Do you find that you push yourself in general more, or do you find that you're pausing more? Is it an equal balance of one to the other, or do you lean more in general towards I'm constantly pushing myself or I'm constantly trying to pause or to stop?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think that there's certain areas that I'm always pushing myself and trying to do more. And then there's other areas where I sometimes feel I am kind of taking the easier road. I'm you know what, let me pause. It's good for me. And I'm just wait, but is it good for me to pause?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And that's the inner debate that I never know.
Yeah.
Of when should I push myself? When should I pause?
I think the barometer of what I use for myself of when I should push myself, because in general I do push myself a lot, but I wouldn't even call it push myself because I think by nature I'm just a motivated person. I always question how much control do I even have over that?
Right.
If I'm not pushing myself, it feels it's out of my comfort zone to not. So I think that's a separate concept of can we even push ourselves? But I think how I know when I'm pushing myself too much is when afterwards I find myself so angry. Where I don't feel I got what I wanted, or I feel I was just a mess, or it puts me out of commission for the next day or so.
Right.
That's when I start to know hey, my anger is too strong here. This is not good. I think yesterday was a perfect lesson, and it's so apropos because here we are recording this on Push Yourself, and this weekend I did push myself, and instead of for the weekend I was hosting, and instead of buying more takeout or asking for more help, what I did instead was that I did everything from scratch, and I did I did ask for help a little bit, so my friends did bring some stuff over, but the rest of it,
in case they're listening, you did a great job. We loved having you.
I don't regret having guests, and I love having friends over. But I think that what I did is that I should have maybe bought a little bit more takeout, or maybe I should have bought things that don't require so many steps, where I bought pre-chopped up stuff rather than chopping everything myself. So it took me, let's say, 5 hours to prepare instead of 2 hours to prepare.
Yeah, that's a big motto. I think that I learned is that I want to push myself, but I don't want to push myself for anything that I don't need to be pushing myself. So again, I know that this is a privilege and a luxury, but very big into cleaning help.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I push myself to clean? That's not something, if I have to decide, let's say there's the work, there's my kids, there is the home, to me, the least important is the home. So let me have, now obviously the home needs to be clean, but least important is me. I want to be engaged in work. I want to be engaged with my kids, but I don't need to be engaged in the homemaking or the cooking at home.
Right.
So if I had to choose one,
you're choosing which area to push yourself in.
That I would not push myself in.
Right.
So I think that what you're saying, that lesson that you learn is why did I do everything myself? Or I could have taken it easier. I like to, anything that is not going to like further me as a person or further my family or further my friends, like, yeah, so buy the cut up fruit or have the more cleaning help, because nobody cares if you cut up the fruit or
Exactly.
not. Now, a good piece of challah, people do care if it was store-bought or homemade. So maybe that's something that I would push myself up for.
My friend did bring the challah. That's why I told her to bring the challah, so I wouldn't have to make the challah.
Exactly. But I'm saying there's certain areas where like I'm not even like equating it as part of this conversation, because, and this could be a lesson that people need to hear. And again, of course, it has to be something that is within your realm that you're able to do. But anything that is not gonna better you or change you or affect anyone close to you, why would that be an area that you would waste energy on?
Right. Like, why would you push yourself in that area? And, I think here, though, is that I didn't know until I was in it. Like, at first I thought, like, wow, it would be great to have fresh food. Like, it would be great to make everything, like, more on Friday rather than on Thursday when Shabbos is so early.
I make that mistake every week, by the way.
And so on the one hand, I'm like, I want to push myself because I really like it this way. Like, I like the end product. Like, I'm going to be happier when the food is better. But what happened was that the whole Shabbos, like, I felt like a little bit, like, overwhelmed inside myself of like, oh no, I couldn't handle this. Why did I do this? And it's almost like a monster inside myself like comes out, and I don't want to see that part. Like, I don't want to see the part of me that's sort of like this little kid that just like making a tantrum saying like, I can't handle this. I can't do this. Stop. Everything stop. Just go away. Like, it's almost like I'm having this like literal tantrum and I'm like rebelling against what I did myself. And so like, I don't like when I start to see that part, and that's an indication to me of like, okay, I pushed myself too much. And it's not like I came out afterwards and I was like, wow, it was so worth it. It wasn't worth it. Like, I had a fabulous time with my friends and I enjoyed their company, but I didn't like the fact that I pushed myself in the wrong area. And therefore it's so much so on Sunday, I was still feeling it. Like, I felt like it was like sort of like a mini trauma. And I don't want to like, use that word lightly, but like, it was sort of like it had reverberations on Sunday because I made the wrong choice to push myself on Shabbos and on Friday.
Yeah, I'm feeling a very similar example that happened to me a few weeks ago. Also, I was having gas and I kind of saved everything for after work on Friday to do. And everything was basically done. And it was, let's say, like 3 hours after Shabbos. And like maybe my baby was napping. Like things were calm. And like I could have gone into bed even and like relaxed a little bit. And I was like, you know what? Let me make fresh challah. And I was like, why not have another 3 hours now? Like, what else am I going to do? And again, also at the meal, I was like a little bit overwhelmed. And I was like, I overworked myself. And like I should have taken those 3 hours. And yes, the fresh challah was so good. But I could have taken the time and just relaxed. I was like, but what's relaxing going to serve me?
Right.
I think that that's my attitude a little bit with the whole pause idea. I'm like, oh, well, what's this going to serve me? And you know what it would have served me? Not to be resentful at the meal. Or it would have served you not to have needed Sunday to recuperate or to enjoy your friend's company a little bit more. And I think that like these afterwards is when it gives us the lesson for what we did wrong. Retroactively, that's the word. But like also how do we remember that in the future? Because I think that that's a big lesson with myself. One thing that I always have to feel like I'm constantly pushing myself is to go out and work out. Right? I never want to work out, and I have to push myself to do that. And sometimes I'm like, well, maybe my body needs to relax. Like, maybe I should give myself a night off, right? Maybe I should pause. And sometimes I'm like, I'm like, no, go push yourself. And I go to the gym, and when I'm working out, I'm like, this was a mistake. Like, I needed, like, I didn't have the headspace for this right now. This was a mistake, right? Sometimes I go to the gym, and I'm like, that's amazing. I'm so happy I pushed myself. I feel so good now. But sometimes I don't, and that's when I know I made the mistake. But how do I know next time, though? That's the problem, because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. And how do we know beforehand if we need to pause and push and not just afterwards retroactively?
I don't think there's ever like this sort of like clarity, like complete clarity. I think we just like based on having experiences over and over again, we sort of learn our patterns of, I think there's sometimes where I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I don't want to go on a run. Right. And I'm like, I'm glued to the bed. I don't want to move. And there's other mornings where I'm like, I really don't necessarily want to, but I know if I push myself, I'll be better. Right. And when I do that afterwards, I'm so happy that I did it. And the mornings that I sleep, I'm so happy that I slept a little bit. And I also trust that I couldn't get out of bed in that morning. So I think it's sort of like in the moment, we have to be like so in line with ourselves. And if we're in line, we then can know what is better and what is worse. And sometimes like it's a hit run. It's a hit or miss, right? It's
not a hit and run.
Not a hit and run. It's like, yeah, no, especially when you're going running, you don't want to use the term hit and run. It's a trial and error, I think is a better word, right? Trial and error of sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not. Right. And so you get to know yourself in that way. But it's never going to be like a definite of like, okay, this is for sure going to be this, or this is for sure going to be that, or for sure I should get up, or for sure I shouldn't get up. Like sometimes it takes a little bit of searching and like, that those conversations that you have when you're like half asleep, at least I have them. It's like, oh, okay, should I get up? Should I not get up? Like, 5 more minutes, 2 more minutes. minutes, 10 more minutes. Like,
Right.
no, just get up, because if you think about this too much and then it's like, okay, why are you even thinking this? Just get out of bed, right?
Yep, I have those conversations, exactly.
Yeah. And so I think like we're always like questioning how much to push ourselves. But, I think on the continuum of like push yourselves, like there is this concept of like the hustle culture
Right.
where like everyone is like work harder, like put more effort in. You're never trying hard enough, like, just constantly like move up and do more and take on more on yourself. And especially for women, I think there is constantly like the do it all. Like we have to get everything done.
Right.
And I think that can lead to it becoming extremely overwhelming. And that's probably why there is the trend now where everyone is talking about like pausing and stopping and taking breaks and self-care and making sure that everything is within reason and that you can handle it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that what the studies are really saying is that the pausing leads to yourself being able to push yourself more.
Mm-hmm.
If you let's say like, I think I've read this somewhere, I don't have the exact science, but let's say working out, because that's my example today. They're saying that your body needs a break some days in order to, not even just to work out better, in order for the working out to have a stronger effect on your body.
Right.
Now, it could be people are going to be like, that's so not true, but I did see that somewhere and I take that very seriously.
No, I've read that also.
So like your body needs an off day, and if you do 3 days, 1 day off kind
because
of
you
thing.
need times for the muscles to heal.
Right.
And to like reconnect
Get
themselves.
stronger or whatever. I don't know this well enough.
Yeah.
But I'm saying the point is that the pausing sometimes can help push yourself more, and I think that that's important for hustle culture.
Right.
That people look at it, like especially in America, because other cultures look at it differently, but like in the Western culture, it's kind of like, oh, like you're frowned upon if you're using your vacation days. Let's say people who have that kind of work, versus like they're given to you to use, but it's like, oh, you're going off, you're taking off, and like you can only work better if you take off to work.
Yeah. I think, on the one hand, like I do appreciate that, like in knowing the benefits of like taking off and knowing the benefits of pausing. But then what happens with that mentality also is then the taking off becomes a pushing yourself because it's becoming a process of
100%.
working harder.
Yeah.
And so like obviously nothing is perfect, but like within that concept of like when we're pausing, we're pausing. When we're stopping, we're stopping. Our body, like, I love that quote where it's like, if you don't pause or if you don't stop, your body will force you to stop.
Yeah.
And like, that's why so many people are getting sick, or
Right.
so many people, like, on the one hand, they're like running. And like before they know it, like they have the flu or they have strep or they have, mono. And I'm a big believer that if you push yourself too hard and you don't stop, your body knows that you need to stop because otherwise it's not good and it's going to make you sick in some way. And so therefore, like, pushing yourself is not always the greatest, but like even within our pauses, like they have to be mindful pauses. But if it's like with the agenda of
Mine are always
in
with the
order,
agenda to push myself more, 100%.
and you find that it still works.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, how it could be counterintuitive, but if I do a yoga class so that way tomorrow I can run faster, I'm still being mindful in the yoga and enjoying the yoga.
Right.
My end game is that this yoga can help me run faster versus just like because I love yoga, which I do love yoga in itself. So maybe that's not the best example, but there are certain times where I'm doing something, even though that's not necessarily, I'm not doing it for itself, but that it can have a good result and it works. Like, I mean, am I going to sleep for sleep, or am I going to sleep so I can have a good day today?
Right. Like,
Well,
I guess
so
there's
can be
certain.
well rested today. I'm not going because like now sometimes I go into my bed and I'm like, yum.
This is the best
This is
feeling,
where I'm
right?
like,
Especially when it's like clean linen and it's still like
cold and, like,
warm.
yeah, and it's cold outside. There's nothing that like, so I'm going to bed for bed, but ultimately I'm going to sleep early. Of course, I'd rather stay up late and binge TV. I want to sleep early so that way I can wake up in the morning and I can be well rested.
Right.
I don't want to wake up tired and grumpy to get up, so I force myself to go to sleep early. So is that pausing or is that pushing myself?
Right. Kind of blurry.
Right. Because I'm pushing myself to go to sleep early, but really sleeping is a kind of relaxation and a pause of the night. So everyone kind of has to find the sweet spot for themselves
Mm-hmm.
of that like moderation, I guess, between pausing and pushing yourself, or when to push yourself and when to pause. But it's hard to know sometimes.
It really is hard to know. And I think like over time, like you start to learn yourselves, but there still might be like that dilemma of should I push, should I not push? But I think like, I'm a strong believer that there's some people who naturally push themselves and they're motivated, and there's some people who naturally don't.
Right.
And I've never spoken to somebody who said like, I'm not pushing myself hard enough. Or if I said to them like, push yourself, and they were like, sure, no problem. Like, I'm going to go and push myself. Like, generally people think that they are pushing themselves to the most. And like, they have like, everyone has a different level of like what they can handle and what they can do. Some people have more energy. Some people have less energy. Some people are generally more creative, so they want to do more. Some people like, they are high, like just high, have tons of ideas, and they want to like do stuff.
If somebody's comfortable with that, like if somebody's happy with the, with where they're at Well, I don't know, because are you, because kind of making me feel like I'm in school, like, are you supposed to be happy with where you're at, or are you always supposed to be striving for more?
Well, I think you can have both, right? You can be happy where you're at, but you can always like, be striving towards something different. But I think it's different for each person. Like I would never be content with just things staying the same. It just doesn't work for me. Like I always need to have a new project or I always need to be onto something new. Like that's just how I was born. I was like that since I was a little kid. Like, I used to have this like box under my bed and it was like filled with different art supplies. And like at night I would just like sit and like create stuff with my scissors and, had little like lamp and like I couldn't just like sit. And if I couldn't fall asleep, I needed an activity to do. And that's what my parents like had given me. So that way, like they knew that I can entertain myself for that, all the way until like seminary where we had this, it was kind of like, I laugh at it now, but like back then, like, the things in seminary that like are so important.
Yeah.
And like back then you're like, like that was an interesting, like, thing to do. But we had like this speech in the beginning of the year where, the Rav was like showing the importance of doing Chumash and Rashi for every single parsha of the year. So every single week you're sitting with a Chumash, like, whether it's during shul or afterwards, and you're learning like every single Rashi of that parsha. And like you sort of said, like, that's something to learn. And I think it was the only girl in my seminary year who of course like took on that challenge and went, and I did it at the end of the year. Like I had like a CM because I stayed for a second year. So therefore like I was able to do like that full round. And I was like years later, I laugh at myself and saying like, that's the same personality trait that brings me to where I am today. Like I think it's just something that's so much a part of me. And I don't know if everybody necessarily has that. And that's what makes me me in a certain sense.
Right.
And so like on the one hand, it was a huge accomplishment, but like I'm always looking for a challenge. Like I don't think when he got up and he said like you should be doing it, that he thought for a split second that anyone didn't. And afterwards, like I think he even said like, I've been teaching this class for so many years and like I don't even know anybody who's done this. And like I took it literally, but also like there's something exciting for me about pushing myself because I see it as like, wow, a new challenge, like a new thing to take on. Like, and I love that. And I think like, maybe some people who like that competition within themselves can see that as like something really to look forward to.
Right. I think that there's certain people that, let's say, have a high ambition and then let's say maybe struggle with how to get there, how to push themselves to get there. But then I think what you're saying is that certain people don't necessarily have that even high ambition,
right.
Or their ambitions are different and it might not look like a high ambition.
Right. And I kind of like, I want to like play with the word ambition a little bit because that has like a positive energy in terms of like, wow, if you work harder, it must be better. Right. And I don't know if it's necessarily like better in a certain way. So like, yes, there's certain things that are productive and it's accomplishing, but like, I don't know if like it can be attributed necessarily. Like, I wouldn't say it's attributed to myself. Like, yes, there is the working hard, but I feel like that energy was given to me in a certain sense.
Have that like that energy to want to do more, and certain people are more comfortable with where they're at, which brings other pros to their life where they're not overextending themselves or they're making more time for more important things maybe, and I think that what you're saying and what I've read a little bit is that it is a nature versus nurture, and who has that kind of energy to want to always be accomplishing more stuff and that energy to get there versus other people, they're just that is not what calls to them.
Right. It was interesting because like both of my friends, like they brought their kids over for the Shabbos and I was just like observing like the different nature of the kids. And like one of them had like a son who he was just like so like proper and like neat and clean. And we're talking about like maybe a 3-year-old. Right. And like you can tell like so much by his nature that like he knows his space and like, he cleans up after himself and like everything was just like, his toys were in a certain area. And then like, there was another kid that was just, I control the house and like feeling very comfortable in their comfort zone. Like, everybody look at me kind of kid. And I'm like, wow, like right away by the time the child is like a year or 2 years, like you already start seeing their personality come out. And that's something that's going to carry them through. And I went over to one of my friends and I said like, how's your kid like, that way? Like, how is he like, cleaning up his toys and like calm in that way? And she's like, he's been this, and it was there like a certain secret. She's like, he's been this way since he was a kid. Like since he was born, this has been with him. And that's something that's probably going to be with him the rest of his life. And so like, we're given that nature and like, we can't necessarily change it. And I do believe that ambition or productivity or people who are naturally pushing themselves, like there's also an element of like, that's just what they're born with. Like
I
they
also
have like,
wonder if we're, let's say, using the word ambition, people have ambition for different things.
Yes.
And then we don't necessarily, because it's not our value, we don't see them as ambitious. Because, like, I'm thinking of someone right now who, like, she doesn't work necessarily and she doesn't work out. And I'm like, oh, look, she's not working out. But, like, her house is so clean and so organized. I would be embarrassed if she walked into mine. You know what I mean? And there's always supper. So she has different priorities, different ambitions, and she's much better at different things than I am.
Yeah.
So I think that like people and I guess, are people always pushing themselves or just pushing themselves or working towards things? They're just, everyone has their own set of what's important to them, what they value that they're working towards.
Right. Yeah. I think like my funniest like client experience at one time was when I first learned about like binge watching, like when Netflix was first like becoming like a huge thing. And like a client like gave me this look and she's like, you never binge watched? She's like, you never stayed up the entire night and just like finished like a series? I can't stay up. No.
I mean, I never stayed up an entire night, but I definitely, listen, I go to sleep at 10, right? So staying up the entire night for me is one. You've never stayed up past the hours that you go to sleep and just been watched?
No.
Wow, I've done that. I mean, high school, let's say, when there's like no priorities, like, school's not counted.
It wasn't my ambition, I guess.
Oh my God. I would stay up. Sorry, Ma. I would stay up until really
You're going to be
late.
grounded now if she listens to this?
I would stay up really, really late at night sometimes. Now, again, there were people that would come in, I remember in college, and be like, oh, so I was up till like 4:30 a.m. watching the new show. And I'm like, I can't imagine staying up till 4:30, but I definitely stayed up past the time that I would go to sleep.
Right.
I'm not a huge binge watcher either, but I'm saying I've definitely had my fair share.
Yeah. Yeah, so I feel like a little left out because like I was never part of that club. But so like she gave me these eyes that like, you know, a mixture of like pity, but also like you are insane that you've never done that and like you are missing out of like one of the pleasures of life.
Yeah,
is
there's
like
something about it, but like not often because you always regret it the next day. Like, really good show and just
exactly.
Like, getting
but I do think that
you've done it with a book probably, no? Like when the Harry Potter books came out.
Happens to be I wasn't into Harry Potter, but like, yeah, I probably like stayed up a lot later than I would just reading.
When the Harry Potter, I don't know, I must have been in like 6th or 7th grade when the 5th or 6th one came out. One of maybe was even the 8th already. Is there 8 Harry Potter books? I don't even know how many there are. I forgot. But I remember like I just came home from camp and like I should have been really tired, but my parents had the book because it came out like I think on visiting day or something, and I read the whole book. So yeah, other things that you stayed up the whole night for, no?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this like boils down to like what everybody's ambition is. And I'm sitting here thinking like, oh gosh, like I'm this like studious kid, like who like I'm missing out on so much because like I'm sitting reading when everybody else is doing these fun like Netflix binges. Like, but I do believe though that, you know, when it comes to like, let's say like staying up the whole night and like watching, like you said before, like most people do regret it afterwards. And so like on the one hand, like you're pushing yourself to have fun, but on the other hand, like afterwards, how do you feel about it? Like, is there like that regret?
I guess with like moderation, like to do this once in a while could be, and as long as you know the next day that you have the day to sleep it out. You have, you know, and you could recover from it. It's fine. If you have other strong priorities in the morning, which is why these kind of things like binge watching usually tends to slow down as we get older. I'm hoping, but I'm saying at least for myself, like the few times I've done it, I haven't been doing it recently. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's something that like is a certain like time frame of like when you can do it.
You can sleep till 11 a.m. You can binge watch the whole night. If my kids are waking me up at 6:30 a.m. It's not worth it.
It happens to be like the only time I pulled an all-nighter was like a Purim when I was working, like where we had to like make sushi the entire night. And literally like I was up at like 6 a.m. and then like stood up until like the next day. Wow. I was the biggest like cranky.
Yeah. I cannot imagine.
Yeah. So I don't know how people do it like with the binge watching like the next day. Like how are they a human being?
It's more relaxing because you're laying in bed versus standing and making sushi. So
I hear.
It's not as like strenuous on the body.
Right.
If you want me to teach you how to binge watch the whole night, but I don't think people are watching the whole night like from 6 a.m. till 6 a.m. We're talking about, I mean, till 3 a.m. Even though that's crazy. You know what I mean? It's not
but I've had people sit with me. I sat with clients where they've said they've stayed up until the sunrise. No. Like, yes, where they're sitting and the sun is rising and they're like, wow, I think like it's time to go to bed. No. Yes.
But then can they sleep till 2 p.m. though?
That's a good question.
You know?
Right. So it's sort of like, are they like living on a different time zone?
Right. They're not doing this every night. It's just when a new show comes out.
Right.
But yeah, so I guess people definitely have different ambition. How did we get to this about your client asking if you would?
Oh, because she was like staring at me. We were talking about like ambition, and yeah, I have no clue where we got here. But somehow we got here. That's the nature of conversation. But you know what? That's probably
people like to work out. Some people like to binge watch.
Exactly. But you know, I think that's probably like how the watching happens is because like you start in one place and you're like, oh, I'll just like watch one episode. And it's like, okay, I'll just watch a second episode because like they ended so well. And then it's like before you know it, you're on the third, fourth, fifth. So it's sort of like how we got to this conversation. Like we have no clue how we got here. But at the same time, you have no clue. It's like the sun is rising and the birds are chirping and you're like, wow, like where'd the night go?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, back to the topic that we were actually supposed to talk about pushing yourself.
And not pushing yourself to binge watch.
No. I mean, maybe I should try that once, like push myself. And like, I think that would be really hard to push myself to binge watch.
Yeah. And I don't think that the goal of that experiment for you would be worth it because you would just be tired the next day. So I don't
Right.
think you'd have a good enough outcome to do it. So
Right.
wouldn't
I don't
recommend
think
it.
so either.
So push yourself to watch the whole night. Yay, you watch the whole night. Now you're
But
tired and cranky for the next 3 days.
But I am
Mhm.
taking this on as like a challenge, like of you like saying like, Sheer, you've never done that. So it's
Yeah,
like, now I
right.
need to try it.
But I'm saying I don't think it's a worthwhile challenge. That's my point. Because what are you going to accomplish except for that you can text me the next day that you binge watched the whole night?
Well,
and
that's
you'll
pretty valuable.
be, right, and that's valuable. And then you're tired for the next 3 days. So don't do it. It's just not worth it.
Maybe like if I'm ever jet lag, I'll do that. So that
That's
way,
not-
like
I don't
it's like
think that's
sort of a
counted,
night.
right?
It's not counted. Okay, I don't know the rules of like.
Give
Give me all the rules of this challenge, and like, cause I'm a rule keeper.
No,
so
I think that the cooler thing would be for you to find something like a show that is worthwhile for you to push yourself past your limits and wanting to go to sleep and stay up late to watch.
Right.
It's not about staying up the whole night. That's not the challenge. The challenge is to mindlessly get so involved in a show that you're next, and you rather do that than go to sleep.
Mhm. And then before you know it, like
It's the morning.
It's
So
the morning,
find
right?
a
So there's like no
show
concept
that
of
will
time.
engross you.
Something, right? It's almost like the pausing. Like when you're pausing, like it should be complete pausing and not like pause. Like when you're, when you're
Right.
trying to relax and you're like relax, and like your mind is just like
Why am I not
circling.
sleeping? Why am I not sleeping? I'm gonna fall asleep. I have
Exactly.
6 hours left to wake up.
Exactly. It's like breathe,
Right.
enjoy this, and it's like it's not working. Like it's just
Right.
not working.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to also like, I'm thinking about like pushing yourself, like we talk about it like from the sense of like us pushing us,
Right.
but what about like us pushing other people?
Right.
Like us pushing other people. Like I'm thinking of a story of a friend of mine who wanted to run a marathon, and she was so motivated. And so she's like, okay, we're gonna wake up at like 5 a.m. and go like running every morning, and that way, like we can both like run together. And like she did it in that morning, like with her husband. And then the next day, like she woke up and he was like, I'm not doing this. And she was like, what do you mean? You have to do this. And she like kept like pushing him, and he was like, I don't want to do this. And so like I think we like do that in our lives where we try to like push other
Right.
people, and like we want them to like match our motivations or match what we want to do. And like it's really hard to push somebody to get to do something. And like as therapists also, I don't know if you find this, but like there's an element of like convincing people to change themselves as you're a therapist. Like it's almost like we're motivating people towards the change that they want to do, but they don't really want to do, because there's
Right.
always like that uncomfortable zone.
I mean, there's the whole concept of motivational interviewing.
Yeah. Right.
It's the whole therapy modality is based on eliciting change within people.
Right. Exactly. And so, there's that desire of like, I want to do the change, but I'm finding myself like not doing that change.
Right. And I guess the question is, can we motivate other people? Can we push other people? And as I'm saying it, I'm shaking my head.
Yeah, I'm like, you're answering it as you're saying it. Like, can we push people? I mean, unless like, coaches push people.
Right. So
Like-
there is this concept where people motivate people and push people. And I think that maybe those
Mhm.
people, they have to want it, and then they just need help getting to it, right? So they
Yeah.
have the goal that they want, and then they need help pushing themselves. And I think
That's
think
probably
as we're
pushing them.
talking-
Like that's pushing themselves. Like hiring somebody to
Right.
push you is
Like a
probably
nutritionist
pushing
or a
yourself.
personal trainer.
Right.
These are all things we can do ourselves, but sometimes we need to pay someone to do it, help us, motivate us.
Yeah.
And I think as we're talking, I'm realizing that there's two differentiations that we're saying, right? There's a concept of pushing ourselves. But there's also the concept of the goal that we're pushing ourselves to. And I think that maybe we can help push people. We can't formulate a goal for other people.
Right.
I think that's the difference. So someone
Yes.
has a goal, we can be their cheerleader, we can be their coach, we can be their therapist, and we can help guide them on the right track to push themselves towards that goal. But we can't make goals for other people.
Right.
We see somewhere like, no, your goal should be to have a happy marriage, to eat healthy,
Mhm.
to do this. Like, no, they have to have their values and their goals. We can't make up the goals for
Right.
them. I
And
think
that's probably
hard.
where we get like stuck most of the time. It's like when our goals aren't aligned with their goals.
Right.
So it's like I can help you if you want to like push yourself towards a specific therapy goal. But if you're coming in and like you're forced to be here, you don't really want that. Or if the defenses are too strong, like it's probably not going to work. And it's reminding me of a story. I was speaking to a personal trainer in my neighborhood. And, I asked her, I said, like, all the people that you go to, like, are they motivated, or do you have to like push them and saying like, get those weights
Right.
or like, jump
Right.
a little bit higher, or like, come on. She's like, Shira, like, actually, most of the people that come to me are really, really motivated. And I find it hard if I'm working with someone who isn't motivated. And she goes, like, at this point, like, most of my clients are all motivated because they want to either be in shape, or they want to like do this for their mental health, or they want to do it because they need to lose weight, or they want to tone their bodies. She goes, but if someone is not doing it or someone else is paying for it, she goes, I find it really hard because it's like they're panting, and then afterwards they're complaining, and it's like 10-minute water break. And she's like, we're only working out for 40 40 minutes, like, and you're doing 10-minute water breaks. Like, what are you doing here? And I was like, that's interesting because like you're hired for motivated people.
Right.
And so like they're already pushing themselves, but they need to push it a drop more and they know that they can't get that from within themselves. So what do? They call you. So that way like you're something that's set up in their day that's going to help them force themselves to do it.
Right. And I think there's certain therapists also who only want to work with motivated people.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, no, I'm only working with people, especially you see this a lot in couples counselors. I'm only working with couples that are ready to go and make the change.
Right.
But, you know, sometimes there are people that want to make the change, but let's say need help eliciting the change.
I think in couples, it's even harder because you can have one who wants it and one who doesn't want it. And so like it's easy to connect to the person who wants the change, and you know the other one that doesn't want it, it kind of feels like, come on, like, you know, it's dragging along here. But it is really, really difficult to work with someone who either doesn't see the value in it, or like you said before, which I really like that explanation of, they don't have the same end goal.
Right.
They don't have that idea of what they want change. Like they're just happy where it is, or they don't see the same issues as you see. And so like clients that are more motivated like are easier to work with.
Yeah.
And it's like, now I'm thinking like all the clients that say like, am I your hardest client? Or like, do I make your life so hard? And it's like, no, I'm not talking about you. But yes, like it is much easier to work with somebody who is motivated and finds themselves the barrier to themselves.
Right.
And therefore, like you just like partner up with them and saying like, we're in this together to help you get to where you want to get to. But when someone doesn't want it, I find that really hard. And that's why I think eating disorders are really hard to work with, or those that are like, you know, self-harming, it's very hard. Or those that, you know, don't see themselves as having any issues. It's really hard because you're sort of saying like, I'm here,
right,
and you don't want to be here, and so anything I'm going to say is just going to roll by you. Like, you know, when I used to work with seminary students in Israel, sometimes like the school mandated it, and that was very, very hard for me and for them because they didn't want to be there. And I knew they were forced to be there. Right. And I don't like when people feel like they're stuck with me. But like sometimes like those sessions were really difficult because it's like, okay, what are we going to do to spend this time? I'm like, can we at least like, you know, play a game? Right. Like, let's at least like, you know, have some fun doing it. Because it's like, I know you don't want to change. And I know you're just forced to do this. And this is mandatory. But like, I'm keeping to your school and you're keeping to your school rules in order for you to stay in your school because you don't want to get kicked out. But like, you don't want to be doing the therapy.
Yeah, I worked a lot also when I worked in Good Samaritan in the chemical dependency and court mandated clients. So,
that's hard.
You know, yeah. So most of the time actually, and I don't know if that was like a manipulation on their part, but most of the time they'd be like, I'm court mandated here, but I really want to do the work also. So I was like, hey, good, I'm so happy. But if we didn't see that, I would kind of, the same thing that you're saying, like, let's just use this time. Like, let's use it smartly. Like, you have this time anyhow. Let's try to see what we can gain from it.
Right. Even if just like the time is pleasant, like that sometimes was just the goal of like having a pleasant experience. Like we don't have to talk anything about therapy. We don't have to talk about school. Like, can we just enjoy each other's company? Like as if like casually what it would be like, because it's like, you know, you're stuck here for the time and I know I'm stuck here for the time, and let's see what we can do to make it the best.
Yeah. I think that with the whole, you know, the whole topic of pushing yourself, and if somebody's, let's say, struggling with this, at least that I know that like I am, is first thing that's important is to formulate those goals.
Yeah.
Write down those goals, think about those goals, and then think about the path of how you want to get there. And also the barriers that you may face.
Yeah.
And some of them might be barriers that you have to get around, and some of them might be the limit. And that's when you pause.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, also like just being in tune with your body, of knowing like when you need to push yourself and when not. Like I find there are certain times like where I feel like that urge to like just like to have a challenge or to push myself a little bit more. There's other times where I'm like slow down. Like it's funny. There's this song and it came out and it's like the constant like words that come up is like run. And like I think like they wrote that song for me. Like literally like as the composer was writing it, if it's sure, like they had me in mind. And like, you know, me and my husband, we joke about that a lot, where it's like, okay, like run. Like, where are you going to now? Like, you're on to the next challenge. Like, what are you doing? But it's like, on the one hand, I think like society as a whole, like we have that pressure of like, do it fast, push yourself. And like, especially like, I think for young adults, like they have that pressure of like, you know, get your life together quickly. And like, you should be doing like tons of stuff for other people and like helping out with the family. And you should have a career, or you're in school at the same time. And you should be putting yourself together. And it's like, run and do everything, like go out there. And it's just like, do we ever stop? And yes, like it's great to do things that are accomplishing, but like I think that automatically without pushing ourselves, life pushes us. like growth is something that happens organically. And so like when I look back, like, you know, to certain years in my life, I think automatically, even if I wasn't necessarily pushing myself at that moment,
Right.
life forced me to push myself.
I think
And
time does that.
time also does that. Yes. And I think like that's also like, you know, for someone who might be feeling pressure of I need to push myself and I have to do more and like I have to do that running, you know, like, you know, let's have the song in the background. Maybe we'll post the link to the song here in the podcast. But it's almost like you don't have to worry so much because life is going to push you. Life is automatically going to show you the direction that you're going to go in. And like how many times like have you seen like you didn't think you would end up somewhere and like there before you know it, like
Right.
you're there. Like I sort of feel like I was pushed into a PhD program. I don't know how I got there. Like it didn't make any sense. But like before I knew it, I was like, you know, in Massachusetts, just like sitting in a class with random people like so much older than me. And like here I am with a PhD. Like I didn't like
just like that. No big deal.
but somehow like it is a big deal. Just in terms of like the amount of work and anybody like thinking about doing one, like prepared for your life to be completely changed. Like I didn't realize like what a life changer it was for me. Like that pushed me more than anything ever did in my life. But like there is something natural about like as you get older and with time and with situation that life brings you, you are forced to be pushed.
Right.
Like you either push yourself or life
Kind
is
of, like,
going to push
the
you.
image that's coming up is like the water. So like you can swim really fast or you can kind of lay there and like the current's going to take you.
Yes. Oh,
So
I love
either way
that.
you're going to get to that goal.
Yeah.
The question is, I guess, how fast, how
Mhm.
strong, right?
Yeah.
How motivated, how inspired do you want to be to get to that goal? So I guess that takes away some of the pressure of like, don't worry, you're going to get to where you need to get to at the end. And
Yeah.
so you're allowed the permission to pause
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to
Exactly.
get there regardless.
Yeah. Right. It's going to take you there no matter what. And what about like for you, like how do you pause?
How do I pause?
Don't ask me that question back because I don't know the answer for myself.
Right. I guess that's really a question that everyone should be asking themselves. Like, how do I pause? I guess there's in forms of self-care. And I think that was really good. What I was told once by my therapist. Basically.
She's getting lots of shout outs in this podcast.
Basically, I was like having a really hard week and I was like really overwhelmed and I was like starting to get, you know, like hyperventilating once in session. And she's like, wow, it sounds like you really like, where's your self-care? Right? I'm like, oops, therapist not knowing how to self-care. And I was like, I actually just went to a Broadway show last week. Like, isn't that the biggest form of self-care? She's like, that's great. But she's like, no, you need to be doing like daily little things that are self-caring you the whole day. So she was like, and I was having at that point, like the example that was coming up was like, I hadn't eaten healthy because I hadn't had time to go buy food. And she's like, buy yourself a salad. I was
Mhm.
like, that's a really smart idea. So I think for myself, I tend to look at the bigger things as a self-care because like that excites me. So like I want to go to a Broadway show. I want to go out to eat. I want to go on vacation. But I think that something that I need to work on is putting self-care throughout the day. If that's buying myself a little treat, if that's going to sleep a little earlier, you know, these kind of little things throughout the day that just can help me relax, take a step back, calm
Mhm.
down, and then motivate me to go further. And yes, I don't know, you know, you didn't love this before. I don't know if it's right or wrong, and I'm gonna have to think about it more. But I do think of for myself, the pausing is to re-energize myself to go further. And I do see the benefit of enjoying the pause for as it is, as a whole. And I guess I have to find what that would be for me.
Yeah.
Like, what is something, like, let's say I'm thinking right now, like, I'm to a massage, right? I mean, I don't get massages a lot, but I'm just thinking a massage wouldn't be something that I'm doing. So, like, I can work out better or I can be stronger. Massage
Right.
is something that I enjoy in the moment.
Yeah.
So I guess a lot of things that I'm doing in my pause is to re-energize me for the future. And I have to find things that I would just enjoy in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I can't think of anything right now that would be just in the moment, something that I could enjoy.
I think a massage is a great example.
Right. But I don't actually,
Yeah.
like I'm saying, that's not something.
Right.
I'm
It's
gonna
not
go
something
do.
like frequently. Like it's like
so I'm trying to think
maybe
of other
once a year.
examples. Maybe like yoga, it does fall more in that department
Mhm.
also. Like I like it because it re-energizes my body, but it's also something that I do enjoy in the moment. Maybe reading a book,
Mm-hmm.
not a therapy book.
No self-help books, just
You
like a
know what I mean?
novel.
Just like a nice novel that's also just to relax and enjoy in the moment. So that's another good example.
Mm-hmm.
Taking a walk, I guess, a slow-paced walk. It's
Yeah.
about enjoying in the moment, getting fresh air. It's about enjoying it in the moment.
Yeah, for sure.
So there are a lot of, so I think there are many different forms of self-care and you have to find what you need in that moment, right? There are the big things that we need, but there are small daily things that we need also.
Yeah. And you know, when I look around in the world, like there's been a couple of like trends that came out like in the last like few months or few years. I think like post-COVID also, like there was a lot of like van life and like digital nomads.
Right.
Or like the Great Resignation, where people were just like feeling that life is too fast paced, and we're encouraged so much to push ourselves that everyone felt like they were like at a break, and they're like,
Right.
for what? for what point, right? Back to your idea of like the goals of like, they felt like there was no goal.
Right.
Like we are working in a corporate job in order to then get paid, give a lot of money to taxes, and then come home exhausted to just wake up, go to the gym in the morning, and then go back to work, and
Right.
then have the weekends to just like relax and maybe like enjoy ourselves a bit.
Right.
And like it just like it felt like a little bit of like a rat race. And like I think when we push ourselves, like there is some element of like it could turn into a rat race if we're doing it like too much. And that's why I think like so many people like tried out this new lifestyle where they would turn their cars into a home and they would
Right.
just travel anywhere, or they would work remotely and like be on different hours while being at the same time in this infinity pool like somewhere in
Right.
Bali or Thailand or
Uh-huh.
one of these like, you know, cheaper countries, so that way like their salary matched up. And then also like the Great Resignation is like where people would like, you know, just post, I'm quitting. Like I'm done, you know, and make like a huge announcement about it.
Quitting. That's
Yes.
the latest thing.
Exactly. And like, so there were like so many themes of like, I think like what that was sort of like a rebellion to was we can't overwork ourselves. Like, is
Right.
this what life is all about? I think people were like stuck with this question of like, is this all? Like, you know, is this
Right.
what's promised to us? Like pushing ourselves, like we're not happy, we're miserable. And so like instead, can I have a better work-life balance, or can I have a balance of working, but also still like enjoying the pool or having better weather, or like not having such a pressured job and still come with the same outcomes and the same lifestyle and to feel a little bit better. So I think like, you know, just as a society, like we're seeing that shift of people really questioning, like, how much do I want to push myself? And like, what does push myself even mean? And is it worth that goal? And for many people, the answer was no. And for some people, though, the answer was yes.
Right.
I think on social media, there's this interpretation of like the harder you push yourself, the more money you're going to make.
Right.
And also those that have more money, it means that they've worked harder. And I think like that has been like debunked a lot of time, like how socioeconomic status or how wealthy you are doesn't necessarily
You know how hard you work. There's people who have like 4 jobs and are
Exactly.
just making it.
exactly barely paying the bills. And then there's some
Right.
people who are like not working that hard, maybe inherited something, and therefore like they're working off of that and living off of that. And so like on social media, I think like, you know, one of the things that I find is on the one hand, it seems so accessible, like all this luxury, it seems like available, like, you know, great vacation or
Right.
like, you know, very expensive handbags or, you know, just like glamorous lifestyles. And like it feels like so close, but like in reality, it's so far. And so like I think like with that push yourself, it's like I think the message of Instagram is like if you push yourself a little bit, like, you know, you can look like that girl, you know,
Right.
or if you push yourself a little bit, like you can have that lifestyle and you can be in, you know, Bora Bora, you know, on one of those islands, you know, or you can be like, you know, just traveling every second because like someone made a reel about it and
Right.
like they have their whole Instagram account showing you how you can do it. It's
Right.
like everything feels attainable. It's like just push yourself somewhat and like you can get this. And like I think it's important to know like sometimes we can't push ourselves towards everything. Like not everything is attainable. Like we can try our best, but like we have to make sure that the end goal is not like sort of defeating us, because like then that can be kind of like, you know,
Right. I mean,
disheartening.
the whole famous joke is like that, you know, somebody works their whole life to make a lot of money to then buy a small little house and sit and fish. Like you could have just done that from the beginning.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so like, you know, you want to start off like that rather than just like wait your whole life for that. And so like, you know, when it comes down to this, like I think what I really like today is that you spoke a lot about like making sure that you know your goals of what are
Yeah.
you pushing yourself towards, and, you know, really questioning like, is pushing ourselves something that everybody can do, and can we push other people? Can we not push other people? And you know what, maybe if we can give people a little bit of like some takeaways for today, or some like food for thought. Or maybe we could talk a little bit about like what we're taking from it.
Yeah, I think that what I'm taking from it is remembering to pause for the pause itself and not
Mhm.
just for the outcome of pushing myself.
Right.
And also getting more in tune with myself of like, when do I need to push myself and how far can I push myself? Like, what's my barriers versus my limits?
Yeah.
Because barriers are okay, we can walk around that. But if that's my limits, I need to accept that and then work towards a different goal.
You know, when I was the dean of my college, so she was talking with me once, and I asked her like, what's the hardest thing about being the dean? And she said, the hardest thing is the fact that the staff around me can't always match my energy. And because I'm pushing myself more than anybody else is, and because I have a lot more motivation, they feel overwhelmed by it, and then nobody works. And I thought that was like pretty interesting, because on the one hand, like people who are pushing themselves, like they often like might be getting irritable if somebody else
Right.
isn't on that same level as them. And so like I think like here, like, you know, one of the things that I'm taking away is like recognizing that everybody has a different capacity to push themselves.
Right.
Everyone has a different capacity of what they need in order to relax. Everyone is going to be motivated by something else, and their ambition is going to be towards a different direction. Someone might have an ambition to relax. Someone might have an ambition to do something slower paced.
Right.
And that that doesn't mean that they're necessarily lazier. I think like, the opposite of like, if you're not pushing yourself, you must be lazy. And I don't think that that's true.
Right, exactly.
I
People
think
have different ambitions.
exactly. People have different goals. People have different interests. People have different paths of what's important to them. And that's what they're going to put all of their energy in. And it might not be within one of your, one of our value systems, but if it's in theirs, it's in theirs.
Right.
And that's really what matters.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah. So this was quite interesting today.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll see you all next week.